See a spike in gas prices this week, and that's expected to continue. We spoke with some who say they are just frustrated with the cost of everything going up.
Well, like anything else, it's going up and things are expensive, so it's going to make it potentially harder for people.
It's tough out here. I feel like I'm living paycheck to paycheck.
It's definitely a little hard right now, especially, cold, heat. You're using more gas during the cold.
Now, like so many others, they too were caught by surprise at the start of the war in the Middle East. And now Congress is looking for answers on exactly what the mission is in Iran and when all of this will end. I talked with Congressman Joe Courtney earlier this week to learn what he's learned so far.
Congressman Courtney, welcome back to Face the Facts. First up, as you see this war with Iran start to widen, do you also see any off-ramps here?
So that's the question of the day, honestly. And, we've had now 3 briefings. There's going to be a 4th later today where, that question is being raised with administration witnesses from the Department of Defense, Secretary of State. And honestly, it's a very unclear, fuzzy picture. The sort of criteria about what defines a successful strike is really changing all the time in terms of, are we looking to just degrade missiles? Or are we looking to eliminate nuclear potential? Are we looking to change regime in Iran? And again, until we kind of get sort of a clearer answer from the people who are actually making decisions, it's really pretty frustrating to sort of get clarity. Obviously, there's high concern in the district, getting calls and emails. We have a number of people, as was reported in the Hartford Courant, who are serving in the Middle East right now. We had a send-off ceremony just about 2 weeks ago for the Army National Guard, who, again, are in Kuwait, which is, where obviously one of the missiles was targeted, and we lost 6 service members in what I consider to be a very preventable incident. The force protection that was in place, and I use that term, loosely, was disgraceful in terms of, the exposure and vulnerability that they had there.
Does that tell you something? If you couple that with what seems to be a late communique saying, get out of these zones quickly. Oftentimes, if you're preparing for a strike, you also prepare for an exit strategy when it comes to diplomats or moving U.S. forces. Did that seem to be structured, chaotic, somewhere in the middle when you were seeing that from the outside?
There's a system that is normally set in place by the State Department for people overseas in tumultuous areas of the world, and a real set method to sort of get them registered and connected to commercial flights out to, sometimes there's chartered planes that come into the region. Sometimes there's military aircraft, that can transport people. Really, we went about 3 or 4 days where, again, our constituents were reaching out to us where the system was just not in place. It is now. Okay, mm-hmm. That's the good news. And we heard from 2 individuals who landed at JFK a few hours ago, who were in Dubai, which has really been a real heavy area of missile targeting that's there. And there's another constituent in Saudi Arabia who, again, we're still working on that one in terms of trying to help the family get out of there. Same thing with the force protection that we talked about. It's pretty clear that where that strike took place in Kuwait, where we lost the service members, there was no overhead protection. And basically it was a trailer, a triple wide, where they were working. And, there were blast walls around it, but that just is, protection from a sort of, side strike, nothing in terms of overhead, which is unfortunately where drones come from.
One of the concerns I've heard you mention, I've heard others mention, former secretaries and other administrations saying this could also be about markets as far as how the oil markets look, and it could also be about ammunition. Do we have enough ammunition to carry out this directive?
So in terms of the really exquisite high-end stuff, which is, the Patriot missile interceptors and the THAAD missile, which is the high altitude, there's no question we're in a dangerously low place in terms of those items, which are frankly not only important in Iran right now, but you need them out in the Indo-Pacific as well, for sure. And obviously Ukraine has been really trying to get as much help as they can. European allies now, I think, are going to be probably the ones trying to help with supplying those exquisite.
Because the United States supplied Ukraine for the last 4 years or so, correct?
It did until, about a year or so ago. Those particular items, have been pretty much paused. That's there. But the lower end, interceptors, we do have more of those. But again, it's, with the drone capacity that Iran has with these Shahed drones that are very cheap, that's really the question of the day, is whether or not, they have more drones than we have interceptors.
If we're using billion-dollar airplanes to take out $20,000 drones, that's not a good financial decision.
It's bad missile math, as they say.
Is the pressure going to increase on defense contractors to resupply more quickly? You can't make missiles any more quickly just because of the need, right?
When you're talking about Patriot missile interceptors, you're talking maybe 1,000 a year versus what was 200 a year, and that's a big jump. But that's still, in terms of the demand that's out there right now, it's it really, I think means that this issue is going to continue for a while.
Regarding the Constitution, it's Congress who's supposed to declare war. Has that changed? Are we no longer in that atmosphere anymore? It seems as if that doesn't happen anymore.
I think it's crystal clear that the Constitution says that either a declaration of war or an authorization of military force is required. And if there was imminent threat, the president can do what they have to do, but they have to come to Congress, nonetheless. And so people may want to vote in favor of this policy, which, they have every right in the world as a member of Congress to do it, but we should have a vote. There should be a declaration of war request.
Congressman Courtney, I know you're busy. We have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us on Face the Facts.
Okay, Mike, take care.